I mean, for me, mysticism is about realization of the divine. It's not about intellectual understanding. I don't even know that it's about convenience in any way, shape, or form, but it's experiential, an experiential knowing of source. Call it whatever you want. I mean, I think that's the path of the mystic.
Welcome to the I Don't Believe in Astrology podcast. The podcast is dedicated to conscious souls looking to change the world. Astrologer by day, climate activist by night. Here is your host, Debra Silverman.
Yeah, you're right.
And I'm right. I like how we began. So meet Paul Selig. You're going to, I love to say that the interviewee gets to do a little description of themselves on their terms. Mm-hmm. This is a podcast with Debra Silverman called I Don't Believe in Astrology. So you don't have to believe in astrology for this to work. But I'd love for you just to give the audience, you're well known in your profession. And I'd love for you to describe what you do.
Well, I'm Paul Selig. I work as a conscious channel. I take dictation, spoken dictation from the guides that I work with. They've spoken into manifestation now 11 books through me. The 11th one is coming out shortly. All of the books are the unedited transcripts of channel lectures, that come through and have been coming through very consistently for about 13 years now. Prior to that, I was a college teacher. Mm-hmm.
Your next book is Resurrection, is that correct?
Nope. Resurrection's out already. The next book is called the Book of Innocence, and it's due out in September.
Okay, so you've written, so this will be your 14th book?
This is the 11th book. The 12th book I'm about to start channeling on in the coming weeks.
So you just sit at the computer and da-da-da-da?
No, I don't do any writing at all. I sit in front of an audience, I close my eyes, and I channel. And so the books are all of the unedited transcripts of spoken channelings. They come through fully formed. Maybe 3 words get edited in a transcript that I mispronounced, because it was going so fast. But that's what I do. I don't write these things at all.
This is so cool. I'm going to start just briefly by sharing your chart, just because the audience, and you may or may not hear, we have it right here. Obviously, there's different languages that people speak in astrology, and it's not necessary for you to understand it. But here's the deal. This is the planet of the channeler. So here's the sun, the circle and the dot. This is obviously your birth information. At the moment of your birth, on November 1st, the planet Neptune, you see the sun was at 8 degrees of Scorpio. That's Scorpio right there. And Neptune, the planet of the channeler, is standing right next. This only happens once a year for about 5 days. You have Neptune sitting on your sun, which describes the gift of being, it looks like a tuning fork, doesn't it? It's a tuning fork. It's the capacity to let energy come down through a higher source. And then because you're double Scorpio, you're so focused, you can't help yourself. You're like, I'm on my mission and I'm going to stay on my mission until I finish. It's a very driven chart because you're double Scorpio. Did you know you were double Scorpio?
I did, yeah.
And then you have Mercury conjunct Venus in Libra. This is the writer, or the translator, I should say, because it's not really a writer. Mercury being your thought process, which is how the mind works. Venus being the artist. They're sitting together in the house of the futurist. So you have this indicator that your mind is an artist from a futuristic technology, which is channeling. Mm-hmm. It's fascinating. And then on the very top of your chart, you have Pluto, which is unusual. This is like if your mom was right here in the middle of the circle when you were born, right above your head was Pluto in Virgo, which describes, Pluto stands for passion. It looks like a P. It stands for passion and intensity in the name of purity. So I understood, having listened to your interviews, that there was some resistance for you. Like, what am I doing? How did I get this job? Who hired me? Is that what it feels like?
Sometimes, yeah, less so now because it's been going on a long time, but I was not somebody who put a lot of stock in channeling. I'm not a very good New Ager. I really never have been. And I was in some ways fascinated and surprised by the advent of this in my life, and have continued to stay fascinated by it, which is part of the reason I continue to do it.
Innocence.
Mm-hmm.
And so what was the original? I'm interested about you. Something happened in your 20s where this opened. I'm curious. I'm sure you've told the story, but I'm so curious about it.
I mean, a number of things happened in sequence. I quit drinking and taking drugs when I was 25. I
That's
heard a
very
voice.
double Scorpio. That's a very double Scorpio topic, is they have addiction as one of their themes.
Well, I did. And I started praying, and I heard a voice telling me to get my act together, and I actually listened to it. It was the first voice. And when I say it was a voice, it's not a voice in the room. It's a thought that stops all other thoughts, crowds out all other thoughts, that has a very different texture to it than my own, a very different kind of resonance. You can't refute it when you hear it. So I started to open up psychically shortly thereafter. I had an experience of energy that summer. It was the summer of the harmonic convergence. People were saying people were going to be waking up.
Wow.
Yeah, it'd be nice I'd like to wake up. And I asked, but I don't know what happened. I went up to my roof to teach myself to meditate. Somebody had given me a crystal and a mantra. I thought you needed those things. And I had an experience of energy moving through my body and out through the top of my head. And shortly thereafter began seeing little lights around people. So it was the beginning of an opening. But really, I think in retrospect, I was very sensitive, and I was doing everything that I could to diminish that. And once I stopped doing that with such intensity, I began to flower, to sort of claim.
And did you resist? Was there, because your chart, you were born with the sun squaring the moon, which describes someone that doesn't say yes without caution.
Yeah, I was resistant, and I was mistrustful and fascinated at the same time. I mean, I was raised sort of an atheist, so this wasn't, it wasn't a casual shift. It wasn't, oh, wouldn't it be nice to get spiritual? I mean, some of it was sheer necessity, given where I was in my life and the fact that I was, not homeless, but could have been close to it, really, in retrospect.
I remember that. Yeah, you were right at the...
It was a very interesting time for me, and it was a very rich time. 25. I was a year out of Yale. Some people stopped drinking and they flower. I stopped drinking and I basically just fell apart. I really didn't have...
Do you know anything about Scorpio? Have you ever been educated about it?
Just some.
Because it has a natural self-destructive tendency. It's the only animal that will kill itself rather than being attacked by someone else. It has a lot of pride.
Interesting. That makes sense to me.
And also the sensitivity, the people that they don't tell you this, that Scorpio, part of why they're so vulnerable to addiction is because it's being assaulted. Your chart is so responsive with Neptune on the sun to vibrations that you can't put words to. And now I'm imagining you figured that out.
Oh, I know how sensitive I am, and I know that it's a gift if I work with it and don't let myself be assailed by it. I mean, some of that's choice, and some of that's what I allow myself to be aligned to. The first.
And how do you protect yourself? What are some of the technologies?
I work with prayer protection before I channel. I just do it as a matter of course. I mean, that's really it. I suppose I could have better habits with this, but I believe that the guides that I work through have my back.
And why do you think they like you so much?
I don't know if it's about like. I think that's a personality construct. I think I've been doing this. I think I've been working with them before. That much I do believe. I don't think that this is a new relationship, but I also think that I asked. And I didn't ask because I expected to have a career as a channeler or for anything to happen with it. I asked to be worked with, and I did so from a place of, in retrospect, real humility. I wasn't looking to be seen. That was the last.
Oh, your chart is quite shy, actually.
Yeah, I'm very shy.
Yeah, it's so funny. So it seems to me Spirit trusted you, having had an old relationship that you can't remember, obviously.
You know, I have some memories, not of them. You know, I know what they've told me in dictation, and I don't get much information about myself or my relationship with them. A couple of times in a few of the books, they've addressed it. Um, you know, and I just go with it, really. You know, I don't walk around thinking of this as special or important. It's what I do. You know, this is how I show up in the world, and this is the work that I've been given, and I'm grateful for it. And I may never fully understand it, and I accept that.
It's
And
very humble. Yeah, that's a very wise, for a double Scorpio with 12th house with Neptune on your sun, your reality is not our reality. You live in a different like a different stratosphere, but to put words to it's almost impossible. Scorpios don't like talking. That's what's so funny. And here's what you do for a living. You hear them and then you repeat it. Is that how it goes?
yeah, almost all the time. I mean, that's my work as a channel, which is really, I look at it as spoken stenography. And then I have a practice as a psychic, which is a bit different because they call me a medium for the living. So I'm basically a radio. So if I'm channeling, I'm tuned into the station, that's the guides, and they're in charge. If I'm reading for someone, they're the station I'm tuned into. I'm hearing them at different levels. And if they have problems with people in their lives, I can usually step into the people in their lives. I may start to resemble them when I do. I'm fairly porous at this level. And I work, you know, kind of as not a transmitter, but a receptor to a transmission that, you know, comes in language for me or comes in physical gesture or a change in my appearance. It's a form of mediumship.
And have they given you one of the themes that's continued throughout my podcast is the global climate issue. So I'm just curious, not specifically to that, but are they optimists? Like, what is the projection?
Yeah. They don't talk about climate change, or they haven't. They talk about how poorly we've treated the planet and that there's, you know, we're going to reap the results of that if we don't, you know, address our behavior and our collective agreement to the reality that we're choosing to learn through. Because they said we're participatory to everything that we see. If we see it, if it's in our experience, we're in energetic alignment to it, and we're supporting it in one way or another. But they have said that humanity is going to make it. And they've said that humanity has chosen to make it. And
that's good to hear.
It's good to hear. So
because I have, as a scientist, someone who's been fascinated by the science and the numbers and the hard evidence, it would only be because you're speaking to the magical realm of the futurist ability to be able to see what we're tending to be learning. It's good to hear that we're on the right street as far as survival.
We're in a period of enormous change, which I expect is going to continue. That's what I think is going to happen, and I think it's necessary, and it's not all going to be terribly comfortable or pleasant, but it really is a release of a known reality in some ways in favor of something else that can be available to us if we align to it. So I hear hope when I channel.
Are you personally an optimist or a pessimist, separate from your channeling?
Separate from my channeling, probably a pessimist, you know, probably a little bit, or a realist. I'm not woo-woo. I was a New Yorker my whole life. Now I live on Maui, but I'm a New Yorker, you know, curmudgeon in some ways. I have a much gentler experience of my life now, and I'm far more optimistic than I ever was. And far more hopeful. And I'm very grateful for that. That took time, but it's been really a radical change that came in increments, and I live the results of that now, and I'm happy for that.
Beautiful. Your chart speaks to curmudgeon. I mean, even your persona speaks to curmudgeon, because I've made a few jokes and you haven't laughed yet. So the point is that you've got a seriousness. That's Pluto on the midheaven. You really, in Virgo, you're pure. Like whatever the language is that describes who you are as far as channeling and being a psychic, the truth is your heart obviously is trustworthy, or they wouldn't hang out with you all the time.
I hope.
Well, based on the results, hello, let's just use the results. We're on the 11th book. You've gotten an incredible reputation. It suggests that there's something pure about your expression.
You know, I show up as best I can, and I always have done it that way. I don't think of myself as an expert. I'm not a spiritual teacher. I don't want to be, and I'm certainly not ascended. You know, when people walk around announcing that they're ascended, I tend to get a little wary of that, because I think the people that probably are enlightened aren't announcing it. They're just being and probably holding the space for everything and everybody else at a higher level. But I'm happy to do what I do. And
it's so beautiful, your innocence. Here's one of my questions I ask my interviewees. If you weren't talking about channeling all the time and doing that, what else would you be talking about? That's a good question.
I don't talk about channeling all the time.
Or if you weren't channeling.
My work. When I'm working, I'm doing this. It's not what I think about when I'm going to the store. I think about staying on my diet. I think about, maybe one day having a partner. I think about, do I want to buy that sculpture to put outside in the garden? I think about banal things that make me happy. That's what I think. Or I worry, because that's how I've been set up my whole life. But I worry less, and I enjoy beauty more, and I take care of myself. So I do think about that. And that's what I think about. I care about art. I care about.
That's Mercury and Venus and Libra.
Yeah. Well,
That's your sensibility. The beauty of this world is a high value. Let me ask you this. This is a funny question. When is the last time that you cried, Mr. Double Scorpio?
I don't remember. It wasn't that long ago. I don't think. But it wasn't a big weep. It wasn't a big messy cry. But I don't recall.
So it's not part of your expression, even though Double Scorpio.
No, not so much. Actually, I think I was reading for somebody, and I was feeling their stuff, and I was crying for them or with them, or feeling their grief. And that doesn't happen a lot, but I do recall that it was in a session, and it probably was in a public session, but I was surprised. But so it's all okay. Go ahead.
I get the distinct feeling that you're not that you're protected, but you live inside of a humble land where it's not relevant. You're just in service. It's a passionate desire to be of service. Is that accurate?
No.
Wrong answer. I love when I'm wrong. Beep. Wrong answer.
It's not a true. I don't think it's a desire to be of service. I think that's how I show up. I was a college teacher for many, many, many years, and I was very good at it, I think, in retrospect. Maybe now I wonder sometimes, but I think for the most part, I was really good at it, and I really loved it. And I taught playwriting at NYU, and I ran a master's program in writing at a school called Goddard in New England, which I did that for 18 years while I was at NYU. It was nuts. But I learned a lot of skills there that, it allows me to show up in front of a room full of people, and allows me to organize something if I need to. But I learned a lot about love when I was a teacher. And I learned a lot about it not being about me, which was really useful, because I think my personality self can be very selfish and self-centered and self-absorbed. And I'm not crazy about those parts of myself. And so I'm happy for the work that I do, and I'm happy if I'm of help to other people, but I'm not driven by that. Some people are, and I respect that, but I'm happy. I just consider that I show up with what I have to offer, and that's what I offer. And that's kind of the beginning and the end of it. And how people receive it is really up to them, because I can't control how people respond to me or my work.
Well, your moon's in Leo, so there's definitely a performer or a being who can stand in front of the room. You just described it.
Yeah. Somebody once said to me, if I didn't have the moon in Leo, I'd probably never leave my head. I'd never leave my house. And that made perfect sense to me.
That's right. Because your chart, it's interesting. Your gift is being a channel for higher consciousness, and you're so smart that you said to your ego, can you just sit down? They don't really care about you. They're using this vehicle as a pure source, because I want to name that. You've got a purity about you.
Well, thank you. But I would suggest no more so, than anybody else. I just happen to be in a position of having to talk about this very weird thing that I seem to be able to do, which is both gift in some ways, I suppose, or capacity, which is probably a better word, and skill, which means it's been developed through time and usage. The instrument that I have, I think, was developed over years. I did a little group that met in my apartment in New York City for about 18 years. People put $10 in a basket. I wasn't advertising. I didn't want people. You had to know somebody to come. And I was fine with that. But I was doing that because I was curious. And I felt compelled to continue. And in retrospect, I was being developed and refined.
I think you don't realize how compulsive, double Scorpio, you're sourcing from a deep desire, whether you know it or not, to be of service.
Okay, I'll take it.
And once that moon in Leo got the flair to stand in front of the room and say, okay, we're going for this. It's the courage. There's a lot of people watching this who are either studying astrology or they're mediums or they have the gift of healing, but there's to your point, a self-consciousness or an understating of their own worthiness or their own ability, because it's really not them.
Mm-hmm.
A really good astrologer has the gift of channeling. Everyone is really, is this a funny question? So those higher beings and the level of their awareness, can you speak to that? Like clearly they are in a different zone or a different frequency. How would you describe that?
I don't know. I mean, they say they meet me at a level of consciousness that they'll call the upper room, which they say is Christ consciousness, that they exist beyond that, but that's where we can meet because it's the highest level of consciousness that one can hold, they say, while they're maintaining form, while you still have the body. But after the body is no longer present, there are other levels beyond that. This is as best I can try to paraphrase what they've said. But they're teachers, and they come to teach, and they're teaching, the realization or the embodiment of the divine as who and what we are, and in what we see and what we experience, which they say is the product of being and operating at a higher level of tone or vibration, which is what they're supporting us in. That's how I get it. And they say they've been doing this for a long time. So this is just how it seems to be coming through in this period, through this vehicle and the language that they're choosing to work with. But they come with energy that's very palpable. So the books aren't just informational, they're energetic attunements that work with the student or the reader in ways that are highly experiential, which is what I like about it. It's not, I don't want anybody to.
How does it affect your body when it's coming through?
It really depends. When I'm reading for somebody, I'm working and I'm present and I'm in the energy. When they're channeling a book, the energy's through the roof, and my nervous system, I think, is going through quite a lot through that. Yeah. It's a very physical experience for me, channeling. Occasionally I see somebody, I don't watch other channels. I really don't know any other channels. I've seen some of Jane Roberts channeling Seth, which I recognized, how she was working. But once in a while on social media, I'll see somebody saying, they're here and this is what there's, and it's all very floaty. For me, it's this boom thing that happens, which is kind of unmistakable. You can't try to channel. You're either in it and it's happening or it's not. It's like the faucet is on or it's not. You can't fake it. You can't try, it's happening or not. So when it's happening, I'm just trying to keep up with it, because it's coming through usually with a real rapidity, not urgency, but they have so much to say and only so much time that I can maintain the dictation. 45, 50 minutes is about the max that I can hold at most lectures. And I don't have a clock, my eyes are closed, but they usually clock right at about a half an hour, like 30 minutes, and they're winding up. And then they might do another one after they take some questions. But it seems that my body can only maintain this for so long without some kind of a little break. When I first started, the very first book was dictated over 2 weeks of sessions. And those sessions were 2 hours, 2.5 hours. And I used to basically fall out of the chair. And I could barely walk when I got up from that. I was just so much. And I've gotten much more used to it. I'm not impacted by it that way. But I think also whatever happens here seems to be happening in more of an awareness of what I can tolerate. The guides have been clear about my body. They got me to stop. They told me they wanted to, this is years ago, they said, we want to keep working with you, but you have to stop smoking in order for us to do that. And I did. And I was a very heavy smoker. And that's when the lectures started. And, they got on me about losing weight, which I did finally, so, and that's just really for my health and ability to hold this and to continue to be, receptive. So, I just show up and I trust that they're taking care. But there are changes that happen in the body as a result of this, and I don't doubt this. I just don't understand them.
And are you enjoying it?
Yeah, I do enjoy it. It's a good feeling to have done this, and it's a good feeling to be in the energy of it. I live alone in the rainforest, which I like. And it's a good way to be in community with other people. And when I read for people, I get a kick out of that because the psychic work you can verify. Channeling is information, it's teaching and it's higher teaching. But if I'm reading for somebody and they say, I'm estranged from my sister, and they give me their sister's name, and I tune into the sister and I start to look like her, I go, oh my God, you look just like her. I like it. It verifies the other stuff for me. And I care enough about what I do that I want to do it well.
That's what I meant by the purity. That's what I'm talking about. Like the desire, the value you have is to do a really good job. That's so.
Yeah, that's very much of who I am. I agree with that.
And so my endless question, if I could talk straight to the, because I definitely am a channel. That's a given. I don't do it like you do it, but as an astrologer, I can feel when my voice, it's not nearly as extreme, but I can definitely feel when it's done. I'm like, what did I say? And then I find that it was really profound and I write it down. But my question is, in the name of astrology, here's my mysterious question that I'd love to get the direct answer of. Astrology is 4,000 years old, brought to us by the Mesopotamians and Egyptians. It's a system that's consistent and has worked. Only found in 1930, Pluto, but we have included it. In the tarot deck, they left 10 cards for the 10 planets. That was in the 15th century. So they've known about this system that is put in place by stars and by a higher intelligence, but I can't figure out where it came from. I bet they could.
I'm not going to go there today. I'm on
you don't have to. You don't have to.
I'm not going to channel for you, but I don't know that they know, or that that's their thing. They might address it. I mean, they address things that I think they would never address, and they do it comfortably. But when they've talked about astrology, and they've talked about it very little, only when somebody's asked about it, they've talked about it as a system and a value, but it's not. It can be limiting, because if you make astrology God, you created an idol or a totem, and if you're being ruled by that, you're actually deciding that there's something that's not beyond that. Right. I don't know if, I'll use the word, for lack of a better word, redemption happens through astrology, but it might happen more readily at certain times in somebody's life. I had my chart done years ago, the first time, I think maybe the second time, years ago, from some guy I didn't know. And he looked at my chart and he said, oh my God, he said, you had one opportunity for romance, for lasting romance. And it was when you were 17 years old. I'm so sorry. Maybe there's something else, but I don't see it. That stank. That was like getting hexed. I didn't like that at all.
You should have astrology police.
And then he said, which was interesting, you have a weekend coming up that is the best week, the most important weekend of your life. And I said, well, was this in my channeling work or in my academic, writing life? And he said, oh, forget your channeling work. It must be in the other. And that turned out to be the weekend where I was invited to channel at the Esalen Institute for the first time out of my apartment before a bunch of scientists and scholars. And I brought the book that had just been channeled in manuscript form in my suitcase. And the editor from Penguin happened to be at the symposium, took the manuscript with him back on the plane, and it was published 8 months later without even being submitted. And that was the most important weekend in many ways, because it changed the trajectory of my life in a very, very direct way. Very, very grateful for that. So he nailed the date. but he didn't nail the benefit or the area. And I'm cautious. I have a dear friend who's a very good psychic, and all of her work is precognitive. All future, 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 future is great. And that's not what I do and what I like to do. I'm really good with the here and now. And when I do predictions, it's because they come, not because I'm looking for them. I'm given that, and then I'll share it, and I'm told I'm pretty accurate. But I don't necessarily want to know the when and the where. And I say to people when I read, okay, yeah, there's a partner coming. He's got, red hair and freckles and, wears a plaid shirt all the time, has a dog. But if you meet some Latin guy, with a cat, and it's great, go for it. I don't want people to create.
What you did to have somebody tell you 17 was the only time what kind of.
Yeah, that kind of stank. But, probably he might have been right. Because I think I know who he was talking about, and it hasn't happened since. But maybe one day, hope springs eternal. Okay.
There should be astrology police, because I've had you can imagine in my practice of 46 years, I've heard a few stories. And I've always thought if I could just have a little address where I could send them, like, do it right now. They're going and telling Paul the stupidest sentence. Now, the other piece of you being an Esalen and having Penguin, and that was a destiny. We call those lines. I'm curious about in 2020 during COVID, you were in your second Saturn return.
Yeah.
Is there any shift that took place for you?
Everything changed. Everything changed.
What does that mean?
Well, I had been living in New York City. I had just gotten a new apartment that I, in fact, never ended up spending a night in. I was working in Costa Rica, channeling at a retreat. When New York shut down, I was not able to go home because nobody could get there, and everything was shut down at the time. And I ended up, a friend said, come to Maui, and found me a little tiny house to stay in, and got me some food and a plane ticket. And I came here, and I basically never left. I mean, I travel now, and
They call that Saturn Return.
It was a perfect, it was a perfect, total beginning of a new chapter.
So back to the point you made about astrology, it's not a religion. It doesn't require you to abandon God in exchange for success, but it is a doorway that gives permission to let the soul feel comfortable when a change is coming, when you're going to have a significant event.
Yeah, but I got to say that 2 years prior to that just stank, So I thought that was the Saturn return. I remember my first Saturn return. That was brutal.
1990.
Yeah, that was really, really, really rough.
Well, it's because it seems to me you are not a personality type who learns on the easy path.
Probably not.
And the addictive personality types who have a 12th house sun with that much Scorpio, they like to learn from difficult situations. They don't want the bamby-pamby, the soft, fluffy, woo stuff.
I don't mind it now. I'll take it any day.
Well, you're aging well.
I am aging well, but I'm really not that interested in drama anymore.
Exactly. So Saturn and Capricorn, this is what your gift is this lifetime, is you get better as you get older. You were old when you were young, and you'll be young when you're older.
That feels really right. I was like a little old man when I was a child.
But you're still a little old man, just in case you haven't looked lately. But you have a spirit now that I'm being funny. That was funny. You have a spirit now. What are you drinking?
Iced coffee.
Just to keep you perky?
Pretty much.
How's it working?
It's working slow.
That's so double Scorpio. The gift you have this lifetime, aging so much better as you get older, is that wisdom is coming your way. And so while you had to go through the school of hard knocks and never get the easy path, and each Saturn return was a slap or a radical negative energy, that's how Scorpio grows out of the weeds. They turn into the beautiful flower.
I believe it. No, I completely agree with you. I'm grateful for both.
Here's a secret. I'm going to just look for your progressed moon. Let's just see here. Not your progressed moon. Oh my God, your progressed moon's in Scorpio too. Listen to this. Your North Node, which is what I nicknamed the shortcut to enlightenment. It's not a planet. It's a mathematical equation to the moon. So it's kind of a vague but definite significant indicator, is in Leo. So the shortcut to enlightenment for you is having fun and being and showing off and being ego-centered, which I don't think is one of your strong suits. When the sun, you were born with the sun and the moon squaring, which suggests that did your parents get divorced?
No, my father died when I was very young.
How young?
5.
Does he come see you?
Nope.
I just love Scorpio. No. But have you felt his presence?
Once, twice, maybe, but I don't, dead people aren't my thing. I'm not a spiritual medium. I have a hard enough time with a person who just can't let go of the thing I said to them 4 years ago and shows up banging in my ear all the time. That I could live without, But if they're dead, I don't, we're fine for the most part.
Because it's so funny because your chart does suggest a relationship with dead people. Just saying.
Yeah, I mean, I can do it. It's just not my work,
Right.
Mhm.
So at this moment, you're working on a book. I'm so interested to hear. This book is Innocence.
Well, that's done. That's out. That'll be out in September, and that'll be on the shelves. Book of Innocence is the 11th book in this series, and I have to begin work on the 12th book either this week or shortly thereafter, because it's due at the end of September, and it usually takes about a month and a half of sittings now to get the manuscript. I just channel, and then the transcriptionist types them up, and then it's all put together, and then I proofread it. But there's no rewriting, so they come quickly.
And are you like, of those books, is there anything that you find yourself living by, that you've been directed or inspired by, or anything that sticks with you?
Yeah, a lot of it. I'm not their best student, but I'm a good enough student.
I'm not their best student.
I'm so busy taking dictation, and I retain a portion of what they say because I'm so busy taking the dictation. So I kind of get what filters in, but I've learned to talk about their work. The first time I really hear a book is when I'm in the studio doing the audiobook, and then I have to read the book aloud, and then I go, oh, wow, this all makes sense. That's amazing, because I'm still surprised that it makes sense. But they say the action of fear is to claim more fear. Every choice we make in fear gets us more of the same. They say what you damns you back.
Once more, just a little slower.
The action of fear is to claim more fear, and every choice you make in fear gets you more of the same. It's its own trajectory. Wow. And I found that to be true. And so I do try to live by that. I don't make choices in fear. That doesn't mean I still don't get afraid, but I try not to act on that.
Do you feel like we live in a safe reality? Do you feel like this place is safe?
I'm coming to that, but that's my upbringing. I didn't grow up in an easy environment, and it wasn't a safe place when I grew up. So I create that. We're always getting what we expect. So if we grow up where it's not safe, our experience of the world is not necessarily that great. It's taken me a long time to be safe in my life, in my world. And I'm so much happier as a result of that.
And
but
do you feel like you're safe now?
Yeah, I do. But there are days, I have a gate with an alarm on it, I have things,
But your chart has levels of paranoia.
What?
Your chart has levels of paranoia where you could, if your imagination wasn't careful,
Sure.
You could scare the shit out of yourself.
Absolutely, and I do my best not to do that, but I have a very good support system of people who do what I do, who can tune in where I can't and say, Paul, it's fine, or Paul, you're safe, and Paul, there's nothing to be concerned about. And, I am grateful that I have that, but my experience of being in my life is very different than it used to be. And I really do feel that that's been earned. Or maybe it's the result of doing the work that I do.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I'm not complaining about it.
Stating wisdom, you're sharing it with all of us. It's no surprise it would not be affecting because my belief is the truth is we're safe. I don't lock anything. Don't tell anyone. I am the person that 100%, having grown up in Detroit with the crime rate at the highest it was, I found out that people are dangerous and I'm safe.
Yeah.
So if you can hold that, I'm giving this to the audience. If you could take out of this interview that here's a man who has been invited to be used by spirit. He willingly has continued to develop your skill set, your instrument. It's now trustworthy. It comes through your body and your nervous system is adjusted and you've taken instruction to quit smoking and do what they say, which is everyone's invitation. And when the spirit sees that you're willing, this is certainly true for me, the magic doesn't stop. It's remarkable when you get to that level of frequency away from fear and feeling like it's not safe, where it suddenly really is safe. Which I think I bug everyone. I don't wear a seatbelt. I do crazy things that people, it really bothers them. Now, does that mean you should do it? No, I'm just letting you know the depth of my soul, because I grew up also in a very dangerous upbringing. I did the work, and this is true for everyone in this room. You can clean out the unconscious packaging that you were handed with listening to spiritual channelers, with learning how to dance, with learning how to sing, there's so many means to clean out when you're double Scorpio, because that's a real, you came in carrying fear. That's your nature. And that's why addiction is so susceptible to Scorpio, because they're scared. It's too vulnerable of a reality you lived in to start. But as the skin gets stronger and as wisdom becomes your name, which clearly you're carrying wisdom, Paul, and humbled as you are, Saturn and Capricorn, you're going to get better and better and better as you get older.
Sounds good to me.
Based on results. There's something to be said about Moon in Leo and North Node in Leo that you get to stand up and be, yay, Paul, look at all you've done. I mean, I just went inside and looked at a little bit of your work and I was like, wow, he's really got a voice.
Thanks. I mean, I'm sometimes surprised that anybody reads these things. But my job is a simple one. My job is to show up. That's what I've done consistently. I think we live in a world now where people watch a YouTube video and then they expect to have a career doing something. And I do feel that I put the time in and was developed through practice. And and I wasn't expecting the outcome, but the one thing I give myself credit for is I kept showing up even when I didn't want to. And it's often not what I'd like to do. It's hard to, have to put your dog to sleep and then channel before 150 people, 2 hours later. It's hard, but I did it and I do it,
Hey, here's a funny question before we're done. If there was someone alive or not that you could have a conversation with, that you've been fascinated with, who would it be?
I don't know. I'd have to think about that. That's not an off the top of my head.
So double Scorpio, give me a minute to go deep.
Nah, it's just, I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, there are probably a handful of mystics I'd be interested in talking to.
Exactly.
That would be more curious for me. People who, had experience. I mean, there were times, I think, historically where this was, you get burned at the stake for doing this stuff. So I'm aware that there's a great legacy for this kind of work and that there were people that I'm sure that were enormously adept and contributing who were not able to share and are not in print. You can read, I actually, there's the one lifetime I do sort of know about was in Florence. And he was a writer and, a mystic. And I would be curious to meet him, to know what that was like, because I've had some recall there. And I actually, and he was published. I actually have books that I wrote like in the 1500s on my shelf that I haven't read yet, which I find really curious. But when I say I think the guides have been around a while, I think they're probably teaching the same stuff that he was getting, but just in a different language and a different time and for a different audience. So, but other than that, I don't know.
That's a great answer. Are you kidding? You went from I don't know to a memory about writing a book. Hello, that was magic. So can you describe mystic? Like if you had to that's a hard word to define.
I mean, for me, mysticism is about realization of the divine. It's not about intellectual understanding. I don't even know that it's about convenience in any way, shape, or form, but it's experiential, an experiential knowing of source. Call it whatever you want. I mean, I think that's the path of the mystic. I don't know that the mystics are, standing on a milk carton passing out pamphlets. I don't know that they're necessarily.
That's funny.
No, I don't know. I mean, my guides once said, somebody once asked me in a podcast, are there any awakened beings on the planet? And my guide said something like, yeah, and they're all like living in caves, being cared for by their community, and they're holding the consciousness for the whole planet,
Oh, I love
That doesn't sound like a lot of fun, but that's what I heard.
They might live in Maui in the middle of a rainforest with themselves inside of a room listening to the music.
Yeah, but I have a little dog and I have somebody that cleans my house and I don't have it so bad. It's not a cave. You know what I mean?
They're in a cave getting taken care of. People are bringing them food. Don't you use your
true.
Change that right now. Let's just start with, I love this. I totally believe this. There are great ones on the planet who we don't know, who are making sure the sun comes up.
Yeah, I put it that way.
And you're a mystic, in case you didn't know.
Okay, nice to hear that. Thank you.
I'm giving you a few pieces of information. One is your life lesson is that you're going to get better as you get older. 2, your North Node's in Leo. You better show up and show up.
So when is my partner going to show up? Is that in my chart? I've been waiting for a long time.
Well, you've been a little ambivalent in how you've described it, and you know exactly how this works. Because you just said, is an airplane going over your head?
Yeah.
It was perfect timing for an error. I noticed the punctuation. You just said that there is your Mercury's in Libra and your Venus is in Libra, and you've got a 12th house sun. You're so deeply inside yourself. You're so deeply inside, and you leave the vacuous space to let channel come through, which means Paul has to leave. That's what's impressive. You spent a lot of time letting Paul go in the other room.
Yeah.
So therefore, his appetite to be normal, Mr. Mystic, or to have a relationship, they're going to be like, where's Paul? He's writing another book in the other room.
You know what? I'll take him. I'll take it anyway,
This has been a great interview. I like to pride myself on being as authentic as possible so I can take off the veneer, because I've been interviewed so many times, and the really good interviewers are present, and you've been so interesting to dance with, because there's a shyness about you. And then that moon in Leo, there's a definite function. It's on the top of your chart. The moon was way up on the top of the sky when you were born in Leo.
Okay.
Saying, make him sit in front of the room and channel. And then the Scorpio's like, do we have to? Can I do it from my bedroom?
That sounds right.
Okay, everyone, you can know that the mystic is waiting for you. The channeling is, everyone's got the ability. Secretly, I know I have the ability, but I turn the thing on and off because, for God's sake, how much can you do today? Oh, now there's an airplane over my head. Okay, I'm going to stop the interview. Is there anything you want of Paul? If you had to give advice to our audience, these astrology students everywhere, what would you say?
I have no advice for anybody today. That's my advice. Don't listen to people.
Double Scorpio live time. Don't tell me what to do. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening. We want to keep this conversation going with you, so please subscribe to our podcast and leave a rating and review to make sure you never miss an episode. Remember, climate activist by day, human by night. Send Debra a DM on Instagram at Debra Silverman Astrology and visit DebraSilvermanAstrology.com. And we're going to leave you like we leave every single episode. Make it your mission to change the world.